Hi,
Hi,
Jess. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Can you hear and see me okay?
Yep, can you hear and
Okay.
see me okay?
Yes, yes.
Awesome.
Um, can someone just give us a thumbs up to make sure they can hear us? Anyone? Can you hear us okay? Yes, okay, perfect. Okay, so I am super excited to have these ladies on because I've been following them for so long, and I think what they do is so necessary and nobody does it. And you guys are super unique in that, and you're super helpful. And I just wanted everyone to know what you do and how helpful it is. So let me first introduce you, and then I'm going to kind of let you explain what you guys do, how you got to that point. I know there's certain things that you want to discuss. I have certain questions from you from followers. So we're just going to get started. So this is Jess from Do It Yourself Breakup. And she's going to do a much better job than I will explaining what they do. But they are all things related to anything from calling off an engagement, calling off a wedding. What do you do when you call off an engagement? How do you know it's the right thing to do? How do you get through it? Who do you contact? What do you do with the aftermath, the embarrassment, the guilt, all of it? So this is what they do. And the other thing they do that I love is they help people figure out what to do with things that you wouldn't even think about in that state of mind. Like, what do you do with your venue that you've booked? What do you do with your bands? What do you do with your dress? All these little details that nobody would think about during that whole process. So I'm going to let Jess take it away and explain what she does and how they got started.
Yeah, well, thank you again for having us. We're super excited to be here, and you did an excellent job. You literally covered pretty much everything that we do, so thank you for that. So yeah, Devin and I, my partner, started DIY Breakup about 6 months ago, and pretty much everything that you said. So we are an online platform that is here to support anything surrounding your called off wedding relationship questions, primarily, like you mentioned, a community to support someone who is either considering calling off their wedding, or maybe their plans have changed and now they've booked something and they no longer want to move forward with that, but they feel kind of stuck. Just how to stay true to yourself and kind of listen to your gut while you're going through what could be one of the biggest decisions of your entire life.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Absolutely. So can you give a little background onto how you guys even thought up something as genius as this?
Yeah. So Devin and I have been friends for years now, and her and I used to work together. And there's many moving parts, I think, to DIY Breakup and what it's become. But I would say the biggest piece of the biggest thing that led us to where we are now and how we came up with the idea of a community to support your called off engagement is truly because when Devin decided to call off her engagement 90 days before her big day, there was just so many what ifs and so many things to do. And there wasn't one platform that you can go to have all of the resources that you need. When you're going through something like that, the last thing you want to do is start Googling, how do I do all of these things? And so
Right.
our hope was to be able to provide a community of support for people that were considering calling it off. And I would say that was the primary factor of how we came up with the idea. And then on the other side of it, I am married, and booked a venue, was going to go the more traditional route due to, I guess, just feeling like that's what I was supposed to do and what was expected of me.
Mm-hmm.
I wound up canceling that venue and wound up losing a lot of money. Had a backyard wedding. It was great, but also didn't really have any resources, or what do you do when you decide you want to cancel a venue? So a lot of different life experiences kind of brought us to this place that we're at now.
Awesome. That's great. So one of the things before we get into some of these questions, is to kind of talk a little bit how to support somebody going through calling off an engagement. And as a friend, as a family member, what is the right thing to do? How can people help? What should they not say at all?
I think the hardest thing, and speaking from my own experience, being there when Devin went through her called off engagement, the hardest thing is not being able to understand what that person's going through. And I would say the most important thing that I learned is it's important to be able to listen. You might not necessarily have all of the advice that you would like to be able to offer to someone, but you can show your support by being there, showing up, checking on your friend, asking them what they need from you. And if they ask for advice, great, share that with them. But listening and being there and showing that support, I think, is half of the battle.
Okay. So what happens if family members are against it?
So I think that every situation is unique, and what goes on in someone's relationship, their family members may not be. If family members are against calling off the wedding, you mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the end of the day, you're probably not going to please everyone in your life, and you're living your life for you. So although it'd be great to have a supportive environment where your friends and family are supportive of you, that's not necessarily going to be the case all the time. You need to stay true to what makes you happy because it's your life and you're living it regardless of whether or not your family and friends are supportive of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Because a lot of times I see a lot of patients who are stuck, and they'll talk about being stuck. And one of the biggest things that I hear was, I knew walking down the aisle it was not right, and I felt like I was going to throw up. I cannot tell you how many variations of that story that I hear. And they did it because they felt like they couldn't get out of it. And that's why I feel like what you guys do is so critical, because I think maybe if people knew that a resource like that existed,
Yeah.
then maybe they'd have some sort of outlet, because I would imagine there's a ton of guilt, embarrassment. You don't want to, you don't want to let people down.
Yeah, and exactly what you said, you feel alone. And at the end of the day, there's so many people that have gone through a called off engagement. And if you ask them now whether or not they are happy with the decision that was made, everyone that I've spoken to, at least in our time during DIY, has been so thankful that that marriage didn't go through. And so when you're in the moment, it's hard to kind of see the whole picture.
Right.
But yeah, I think having the support system is one of the things that makes it hard, because you look at social media, people aren't really posting about the things that they don't want you to see. So you might see people that look like they're happily engaged or happily married, but you don't really know what's going on behind closed doors, and people aren't necessarily going to be sharing that. I think
don't.
Yeah.
So, they don't.
Right. And, you're not alone when you're going through this. And we just wanted to be able to provide that platform to say, look at all of these other people that have called off their wedding, or that have decided that it just wasn't the right time for them, or whatever it may be. So many different stories, but the stories are out there and they exist. And if we can share that platform to allow those conversations to happen, then we're doing what we're here to do.
Absolutely. And one of the things too that I love that you guys do, and your Instagram name is on my post that I did, but one of the things they have is the do-it-yourself breakup Bible. Is that what it is?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So you can tell I love their page. So they have a whole bunch of stories of people's whole entire journey of what they've gone through. And it's amazing. As much as the theme may be the same, everybody's story is so uniquely different. And it's so good to read other people's stories. And I've sent a lot of people your way to do exactly that, so they don't feel alone. Because I think people have the misconception, and again, I have a bias sample based on my patients, but from my patients that I see that are unhappy in their marriages, there's this idea that kind of you'll go through the wedding and you'll figure it out later.
Exactly.
You'll deal with it later.
Right.
And that later never happens. In fact, the opposite tends to happen, and it goes in the other direction.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I was speaking with someone recently, and we kind of put it into perspective, it's like the wedding is a pit stop. You know, the wedding is the, hey, let's enjoy this day to celebrate with our friends and family. And I think in our society, there's so much emphasis put on the wedding that we don't necessarily focus on what comes after that, which is hopefully a lifetime together with this person that you are celebrating with on one day. And so with an emphasis on the wedding and less of an emphasis on the marriage at that point, at least, I think that I completely agree. It's like, you know, you wind up going through the motions because it's what you're supposed to do, with the expectation that things will change once you get over this hump, but it doesn't.
It doesn't. So that actually leads me to one of the first questions that I have, which was, what do you do if, I'm going to get it exactly right so I don't mess this up, but okay. When to leave when you don't know if it's seeing potential in someone or wanting them to change. Meaning when you get married or you're engaged and you're looking more at, I mean, I know the answer that I always give people, but I want to kind of hear it from your standpoint. I equate it to when you're buying a house. And one of the things that realtors will routinely say is you don't buy a house based on what you think you'll be able to pay in 5 years. You know, even if you think it's going to be, you'll have more money in 5 years, you never buy a house based on projected income. You always buy based on what you have now. And so I look at that in the same way, that if you're marrying somebody for the potential in terms of how the relationship could grow or they can change, you never want to marry for potential. You want to marry for how they are now, because how they are now, for the most part, is either what you're going to get or it's going to go the other way. It kind of rarely goes in the healthy way. So not that people can't grow together, but if that's your kind of deciding factor. So if you could speak a little bit to that, as far as how to know if it's that to know the difference between marrying somebody for potential versus wanting them to change and hoping that they'll change.
So it's an interesting question. And I think that potential is something that's important, because even for yourself, right, you're always trying to do better and be a better version of yourself. When it comes to putting all of your faith and hope that this person is going to change and there's a chance they can do it, but they haven't made or shown any steps that they want to do it, I think is one thing. If you're having conversations with your significant other, and let's say there's an issue that's coming up and you're seeing change in your art, you know, you're having conversations and you're seeing change after those topics are discussed, then yeah, maybe that's a potential that you could stick around for, because you're both putting in the work. But if you're simply sitting there saying, I want to change this about my partner, I hope that they start doing this one day, at the end of the day, yes, you know, it could be easy to fall into that trap of hoping that this person will change to be what you need them to be. But I guarantee that there's someone out there that you're going to meet, and I'm sure there will be small things that you'll want to change.
Of course.
But for the most part, you're not going to want to change everything about that person, because you're going to complement each other more so than you are going to hurt each other.
Right. And, you know, there's certain things that I always say to people are deal breakers, certain things that are red flags. And those are two different things. But with deal breakers, those are things you're not willing to sacrifice. And everybody's deal breakers are different. It could be, you know, it could be anything. And so a lot of times I find that people who are going through with an engagement or a wedding are usually compromising one of their deal breakers. They've ignored the red flags, but I find that the real issues come when they have sacrificed their deal breakers.
Yeah.
So that's what I've noticed. And so, and again, as far as potential, you never want to be with somebody based on what they could be, because it's not what they could be. It's based on your perception of what they could be. Their idea of what they could be may have nothing to do with yours. They don't know what you're thinking. I doubt anyone's ever said, I'm marrying you for the potential that you could one day become X, Y, and Z. Nobody's talking about that, right? So somebody had posted a question on here about soulmates. And just to let everyone know, at 8:30, Devin is going to come on and talk about some, like, kind of the other half of do-it-yourself breakup. So we have another 15 minutes with Jess. Somebody had asked a question about soulmates. And for those people that are on here that know me and know how I work and know just kind of my take on things, I tend to lean away towards the concept of soulmates for a couple reasons. One, everybody's definition of a soulmate is different. I think soulmate has a little bit of a fantasy quality to it that we're taught, particularly as women, I'll say, that we are supposed to find our one. And I just remember, even growing up, I used to get so annoyed when people would say that, because how can there just be one? There's millions and billions of people. I mean, how can you just have a one? And so one of the things that I always say is that, and this is what the person was getting at, they were asking if there's such a thing as soulmates. And if there is such a thing as soulmates, is it a soulmate for a certain period of time and then it's over, and then you find somebody else that's a soulmate for that point in your life? And so I would change the word to soulmate to just partner, because soulmate kind of hits this fantasy place that I think we're taught that isn't very accurate, and sets us up, especially as females, for failure, that if it doesn't work out, it's somehow our loss, or we didn't do something right. So I do believe, though, that who you ends up with is based on timing. And right, friends can be soulmates. Absolutely. I believe that completely. I think that with relationships, timing is everything. I think that, you know, who I would have married at 25 would have been drastically different than who I would have married at 30. I got married late. I got married at 34. Who I would have married at 34. You know, I don't think I would have married my husband at 30 or 25. I know I wouldn't have. And so I think if you marry somebody, let's say earlier on, and at that point you feel like you kind of go together and it fits at that time, the relationship goes one of two ways, right? You either grow together or you grow apart. And I don't think that's any less true the older you get married. I think that can absolutely still happen. You just have a shorter time to be married. So no, I don't necessarily think soulmate is kind of a good place to take your head to. I think when you meet someone, I do think timing has everything to do with it. But I think it's important to understand that if it doesn't work out, like Jess was saying, that there are many other people out there, which is why there is no one.
Exactly.
Because imagine the feeling if you have this one soulmate and they leave you for somebody else. Well, that's going to feel a hell of a lot worse about your self-esteem than if, you know, somebody, it just doesn't work, let's say, and you know there's other people out there.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly, and relationships are just like anything else in the world, really. It's a learning experience. And you mentioned you're either going to grow together, you're going to grow apart. And so if you're at a point in your life where you were with someone who you felt was your soulmate, or whatever you want to call it, for a certain point, and that changed, that's okay. Things change. And like you said, you're going to find someone again if that's what you want to do. If you don't want to do that, you want to travel the world, and you know, life plans change, that's okay too. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's your life. You have one of them, and it's important to just continue to stay true with yourself. Another thing that you mentioned was soulmate, and kind of makes it sound like a fantasy. Regardless of what we see on social media, you know, pictures of happy couples, everyone fights. That's normal. There's no such thing as a perfect relationship. And so if your expectation is of a soulmate is someone who, you know, you get along with all the time, and there's no ups and downs, and it's just always, you know, a high road, you're going to be setting yourself up for disappointment.
Agree. And somebody wrote in here, which I think is really, really smart, that sometimes relationships successfully ends just because they end. It doesn't mean they fail. I think that's so smart, and I could not agree more. I really couldn't. But I think that depends on the people in the relationship. I think that really depends on the level of communication that they have with each other, the level of openness, the level of honesty, and how they resolve their issues. That's one of the biggest things. It's not, are you going to fight with your spouse, yes or no? It's, when you do fight, what does it look like? Are you throwing glasses at each other's heads? Are you ignoring each other and playing the silent game for a week? Are you talking it out? Are you screaming? So I think part of the growing together and if a relationship lasts is a lot of how you argue, not if you argue, but how you argue. So next question I want to get to, because I want to make sure I ask you this. Is it okay to miss what you had, even if it was all lies?
I think that it's a normal part of the grieving process. And I can't take credit for this thought. I think I saw it on, I want to say, a reality show way back in the day, but it stuck with me. And it was whoever was on the show basically saying, you need to grieve the loss of that person, because if you were with someone and you had a perception of them that wasn't a reality, you need to grieve that like a death, because that person never existed, and now in your life they died. So right. Yes, I think I think it's normal, and I think everyone goes through that. And once you have your grieving process, you hopefully learn from it and you move on, and you understand that, you know, this isn't what I'm looking for at this point in my life. Here's what I learned from that relationship, and here's what I hope I find going forward, because this is what I am now looking for.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you're saying that it's normal, and I agree. I think it's a normal response to a breakup, and especially if you're with somebody that tends to be on kind of the narcissistic spectrum of things and more towards the higher end of it. A lot of times what you see isn't what you get, and what you get isn't until they have you. And so the person that they are before you get married is very different than the person you have after you're married. And that's on purpose, and that's manipulative. It's not that they just all of a sudden change. They've always been that way, and the person that you married was not real.
Right.
And I think the person that you dated was not real. And that's really hard for people to grasp, because they keep saying, I want it to go back to the way it was. I want him or her the way they used to be. Mm-hmm. One of the hardest things and most painful things, and I feel it when I work with people, the pain they have about it, that person never existed. Mm-hmm. And that's brutal. And, you know, and I think that's exactly what you said. You're mourning the death of something, but it was never there to begin with. And it, you know, excuse my language, but it's a total mind fuck. It really is, because you just haven't, to think that person never existed. It's just, it's like a foreign concept.
Yes.
So it's hard to take in. So I agree completely with that. So whoever asked that question, it's more than normal to miss it, because missing is an emotion. If your behaviors are in line with that, that's a little bit different. If you're, you know, find that you're stalking their page all the time, right? If you're trying to figure out who they're dating and, you know, requesting their girlfriends, roommates, ex-boyfriends to see their pictures, if you keep driving by their house, if you're not dating anybody else, if you're not eating, you're not sleeping, you know, then that's something that you need to address. But just missing them, that's completely human and normal. Don't try to not miss them, because it'll stay around a lot longer than if you just let yourself go through the grieving process, even though it hurts. So we have about 5 more minutes. I have another question that I have written down for you. And if anyone else has any last minute questions, feel free to jump in before Devin gets on, who's the other half of Do It Yourself Breakup. The other question was, can a marriage that's gone toxic, hold on, sorry, I'm blind, hang on. Can a marriage gone toxic go back to healthy?
I think that's a great question. I think that it truly depends on the situation. I mean, if by toxic there's any type of physical or verbal abuse, it's probably something else, and I'm not equipped to talk about that. But if by toxic you mean maybe both parties haven't been treating each other fairly, or how you like to be treated, or there's some type of issue going on, nothing's impossible. But at the same time, both people need to want it equally and want to put in the effort to make something work. Again, I think anything is possible. It really depends on what it means by toxic relationship.
Oh, great.
I feel like you could probably shed some light on a toxic relationship more than I can. But in terms of, if you're unhappy in your marriage, can things change? Absolutely. Is it going to change overnight, or if only one person's putting in the work? Definitely not. So as long as you're both on the same page and you're ready to put in the work, because it probably won't be easy, then I don't see why not.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think I agree with you. I think it depends. I think toxic is a word that's thrown around a lot. As a psychologist, when I hear toxic, I usually think of more than just unhealthy. I think of abuse, either physical, a lot of emotional abuse, manipulation, personality disorder, um, you know, lying, cheating, kind of, drug addiction, gambling, all of these kind of things that can happen within a toxic relationship. I think that it depends on the person who is toxic and what the other person responds to. So again, if you're dealing with someone that is a narcissist, that will never change. Never. So if you're in a toxic relationship with someone that's a narcissist and you're waiting for them to change, it will not happen. It will get worse. They will never change no matter how much therapy they have. They don't go to therapy anyway, but that will never change. That I can say with certainty. If it's somebody, let's say, that has a substance abuse problem and it's wrecking the marriage, but they're willing to get help and they get clean, and they are willing to take the steps that they need to take to get sober for them or their children, I think then that's a time where that could absolutely work. If toxic is, if somebody cheats, let's say somebody, I don't know, let's say somebody is unhappy and they cheat. And I've had this with a lot of my patients. Somebody cheats, they don't want to break up. And so, I don't do couples therapy, so I'd refer them. But one of the things is that usually the reason why that happens in the first place was because something within the marriage that they're not getting was lacking. And they look for that in someone else. It doesn't mean they don't love their partner. Mm-hmm. And they actually compartmentalize it very well. But if whatever is lacking is something, one, that's realistic and realistic that your partner can actually give you, then yeah, absolutely, I think you can work through it. But if you're asking your partner for something that they're limited in, chances are that won't happen. And so either you need to adjust your sense of expectations, and if you can't, then it's okay if it doesn't work out. Kind of exactly what Jess was saying. It depends on deal breakers. Yeah, I'd spoken about that before, about deal breakers. I find that most people that got married with a pit in their stomach, it was because they gave up on some of their deal breakers, and they knew that, but they felt stuck. So I think that was for you. Any last minute words on how to kind of, I know this is a loaded question, but any strategies, kind of general strategies that you can think of as far as how does somebody just start over? Everything's done and in the past, and now what?
I think the first thing that you need to do is that, I can speak if I was in the situation, and hopefully the first thing I would do is acknowledge it and just say, okay, like, this is where I'm at. There's no right or wrong way to go about this. I'm not doing something wrong. This is just where I'm at, and accept it for what it is. And I think once you're able to make that understand that that's where you are, and you've made a decision to start over, from there you can kind of start taking the steps to do what you need to do in order for that fresh start to feel like you need it to feel. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so acknowledging it and just accepting it, and trying not to feel any way about it other than, this is my new start, and how do I want it to be, because now it's about me.
Now it's about you. Agree. Mm-hmm. I think that was great info. Again, thank you so much. I know Devin's going to come on. I don't know if she's on here already.
I think she'll I'll sign off and then she'll sign on.
She'll sign on. Okay, great. Yep. So Devin's going to come on next and talk about the other half of Do It Yourself Breakup. Jess, thank you so much. This was awesome. And I'm so excited that we finally got to talk, because I think you are such a good resource for people.
Thank you.
And I'm so happy you guys have this. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. And it was sure. All right, I'll let Devin sign on.
Okay, Devin's going to sign on, so if everyone just wants to hang out for 1 second. And if anyone has any questions, post them here for me so I can write them down and add them to our list of questions for Devin. Okay, I think I got her request. Yep. Okay, we got you. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are
Good
you?
to see you.
You too.
Thank you for joining us.
Of course. I'm so excited to be here.
I know. I was saying to everybody, I've been stalking you guys since you started. And I just love what you do. And I think you have so much unique information to offer people that they don't know is out there and that they don't even know is a thing. So,
Thanks.
yeah,
I appreciate that.
I think it's just such a good thing for, especially for women, to know that there is somewhere to go, that they are not by themselves, they are not crazy, and that they're gonna be okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest part. And I think Jess shared a little bit of that already. I was engaged, called off my wedding, felt like I was the only person in the world who had ever been through this just because people were not talking about it.
Right.
It seemed like there was a stigma attached to canceling your wedding. There was something wrong with you. You were broken. You weren't following the path you're supposed to in life. And I so desperately wanted to have a place that I could turn to where people had been through exactly what I was going through at the time and knew everything I was feeling. It would just been made it so much easier to push through, and I might have even called off my wedding sooner if I had a place where I could go and just feel like I could connect to people who understood it.
Right, right. So before we get into the questions, and I have some points I know that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
But can you kind of give a little bit of background on you and why you got into this, and kind of from your angle how all of this started for you and Jess?
Yeah, so like Jess mentioned, we used to work together. I was in a relationship for about 6 years, went through all the normal stages of moving in together, getting engaged, started planning this wedding. During my entire engagement, even on the day I got engaged, I just felt so off about things. And throughout our entire engagement,
Katie Bilski.
Kate, I miss you. I just felt like I just knew something was off and I didn't know what it was. And everyone that I spoke to, I mean, I wasn't honest about everything that was going on in the relationship. I had a lot of embarrassment and shame as to what our relationship was at the core. But throughout the entire process, I knew in my heart something was so wrong. And there were so many points throughout the process where I wanted to call it off, and I felt like I was just too far in to be able to do so. And I didn't know how to make it stop or how to end it. And there was so much constantly weighing on me that I really just didn't know what to do. And so Jess, we had worked together at the time, and she was really one of the only people I confided in and was honest about what was going on in my relationship. And we had a lot of she helped me through so much. She was my personal therapist that I told everything to and just talked me through so many things. But when I finally decided to call off my wedding, we kind of came together and was like, there's just a missing piece in the world where people could benefit from this, because once I made the decision and it was out there, there was just an outpouring of people contacting me, messaging me on social media, just about they heard what had happened and they were in the same situation. And it seemed like there was almost a secret community of us that existed and really didn't have anywhere to go. And that's really what inspired DIY and us just, taking it into our own hands and putting it out there. It's okay to end a relationship. It's okay to, start over at 30. It's not the end of the world, and there are better things to come.
And do you think when you said secret community, do you think that's based in fear of being judged by others and the stigma that you did something wrong or somehow you're at fault for not carrying through with this fairy tale dream situation?
I think that's a huge part of it. I had a lot of embarrassment. I felt as if people would judge me, you know, what's wrong with her, that she wasn't able to make this work, or what's wrong with her that she's single at 30 years old. I think there's a ton of societal pressure now more than ever to have these big extravagant weddings, and it's kind of thrown in your face because you look through your social media feed and their wedding pictures, wedding Facebook groups, and I mean, if that's what you want, great. I think it's wonderful. There's a wedding and relationship for everyone. But I think those outside factors definitely affect you and, you know, affect the decisions that you ultimately make.
Yeah. And I think social media is wonderful for so many reasons, but it also is really, really dangerous. It portrays everybody as great. It portrays everybody as happily married, great kids. Everyone's just great. And no one is always just great. It's just not possible. That's just not how our brain, forget, life's up and down. Our brains don't work like that.
Right.
If we always felt good, then, we'd be getting hit by cars left and right because our anxiety wouldn't motivate us to look both ways. So like we really, truly can't just feel good all the time.
Right. And I was guilty of that. I painted this false picture of my relationship. Yeah. And, I had my engagement pictures, and of course they were on my social media feed, and it was like, oh, we're this happy couple, but at the core, we were not happy at all.
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of times I'll post about my middle daughter, and they're just funny because she's a pistol, and I always post like honest things about her, and it's so much more refreshing, I think, than posting the sweet, innocent kind of everything's great picture, I mean, because sometimes it's just a disaster. So I don't think that people are, when it comes to marriages and it comes to relationships, are going to ever post that kind of stuff, because just like you said, the perception that you should be in this perfect relationship and that your picture should look like everybody else's pictures, when everybody else's pictures are just trying to look like everybody else's pictures, and no one's really putting, they're only putting their best foot forward on social media. So it's important that people keep that in mind, that it logically makes no sense that everyone on social media that they're all in amazing marriages.
Right.
Logically,
no posting. I got in a fight with my husband tonight. Yeah. He's sleeping on the couch.
Right.
TGIF.
It doesn't make any sense. So it just, the odds are, statistically speaking, that makes no sense.
Right.
So as far as the questions that people had, that I think, based on the topics that you wanted to touch on, I think these questions are good for you. Let me get my glasses on. Here they go. Okay. So first question is, how do you know if you should call off an engagement? I know it's kind of a broad question.
I think there are a lot of ways to know. I mean, I always start with,
I like that brutal, honest trend. I think we should all do that.
What are your the reasons for getting engaged in the first place? Why do you want to marry this person? Is it for the pictures that you can post on social media? Is it so you can wear a dress? Is it for the wedding and the party? Once you take away all of the bells and whistles, would you be fine getting married in your backyard with, just your parents there watching you? You have to really evaluate, why do you want to spend the rest of your life with this person? I think if you're truthful with yourself about that, that's a good place to start. One of the things that I really thought about when I was in my relationship was, does this person make everyday life easier? And answer was no. And that was a huge part in me realizing, okay, maybe he's not the person for me. And like you guys, you and Jess both mentioned before, you will have fights. There will be things you disagree on. No relationship is perfect. But every day, the way that the two of you interact together, does he or she make it a little bit easier and better for you? I think that was hugely important for me. And something that really helped, Jess actually recommended this to me when I was kind of like down to the wire of should I break up with him or not. She had me make a list of all of the things that I love about him and that I would never want to change and he doesn't need to change. And then also make a list of the things that I do want him to change, and then look at that list and really evaluate, does he have the ability to change those parts of himself? And if not, am I willing to put up with that for forever? And when I finally made the list, it wasn't that many positive things. They were all things that I kind of liked about myself, that I felt like the two of us together gave me. And all of the things about that I didn't like about him were things that were never going to change, and they were things that were going to only get worse and ultimately cause even more friction between us.
So you think it's important to not look so much at the person themselves, it sounds like, but to look the opposite way, look towards you and evaluate why you're doing this, what's your reason. If you take away all the bells and whistles, which I love that idea. If you got married, you know, in your small backyard in jeans and a t-shirt with just your family there, would you be, you know, equally as content and happy? And realizing that the things that you didn't like, that you were uncomfortable with, that you had this feeling about, were things that you knew he was not going to change.
Right.
And I think a lot of times, you know, women in particular, we are caretakers by nature, right? We want to fix, we want to help. That's just who, you know, that's just what I call it, evolution. I don't know, but most of us, I'll say, are caretakers. And we think we can help and fix. And a lot of people take that responsibility on to fix those qualities of people when they shouldn't, because it's completely out of their control. So,
I was guilty of that. I thought I could fix everything.
Of course, we all would.
I would see potential. And, you know, we would have these moments where things would be really great, but they would be so small. And I would definitely hang on to those moments. And they were such a small portion of our dynamic and our relationship. But that's what I chose to focus on. And, you know, once you start to consider the issues that you're having and what the real problems are in your relationship, it's easy to see, you know, I maybe not am meant to be with this person. And I think people who aren't in toxic relationships, or there's no huge like screaming issue, it's harder to make that decision. And sometimes you just fall out of love with people, and they could be so kind and wonderful and everything you would imagine your future spouse to be like, but there's just a lack of passion, or, you know, the spark just isn't there. The chemistry is gone. And I think it's a little bit tougher for those types of relationships to figure it out. And I don't know if you have a better suggestion for anyone in that situation.
I think in those particular types of situations, when there is not this one, I also think even in abusive and toxic relationships, there's never just one. It's rare that somebody leaves after one major abusive event. Unfortunately, it's rare. And if we're going to talk about women leaving, usually most of the times they give another chance, because the type of personality style they have, it fits in an unhealthy way, but it fits with the abusive partner, and they'll think that it's their fault, or if they had just done something different, or they had just done something better, this won't happen again. And they take it upon themselves to make it as if it's the result of their behavior, rather than no matter what you do, nobody should ever touch you or harm you or emotionally abuse you. But some women will take that on as their responsibility. So in those relationships, I think what ends up happening, what I tend to see are, I work with women a lot and help them to become independently minded and stronger in terms of their sense of self and their self-efficacy, so that they then feel more capable of leaving, because whoever they're with is trying to make them feel that they don't exist unless they're with them, that they don't have a sense of identity unless they're with them. And they make them feel like they're crazy. They lose their sense of reality. Like, did that really happen? Did I do that? And you start questioning yourself. And it can become very manipulative. So I think those are very difficult to leave for those reasons. I think the relationships where, you know, like you said, where there's no abusive behavior, there's no toxic nature to the relationship, it's just fizzled. And, you know, you've tried couples therapy and you've tried to work on things and you've talked about it openly, but it's just not there. And I think it depends at the point you're at in your life and what your needs are at the time. But that, I think, is harder to get out of for a different way. I think for a different reason. I think that that's hard to get out of because there isn't anything really toxic to hang your hat on. And you can't really pinpoint or identify what it is. And you don't want to kind of go the cliche route of, well, we fell out of love. Well, what does that look like? What does that mean? So I think that they're equally difficult to get out of for their own reasons, for sure.
Right. I agree.
Somebody wrote, what about a family member always interfering in your relationship? Do adult children have a say? So if you can talk, I guess that's two questions. If you can talk a little bit about what you've seen working with people as far as their parents becoming over involved or too under involved in their decisions to call off the wedding or even engagement or even after the fact, you know, kind of holding a grudge against them or making them feel guilty for their decisions.
Yeah. I mean, I guess to start, if you're in a relationship and you're engaged going through the wedding process, it's normal for family members to become over involved and insert their opinions about things, especially if they're paying for the cost of the wedding. And I think what makes a successful relationship is the two of you sticking together and being on the same side. For me,
like a unified front kind of.
Yeah. And you never want to feel like your significant other is going to take the side of their mom or their dad or a family member over yours. And, you know, even if you have to go against something that your family feels strongly about, you have to do it together and you have to have each other's back. And I know that's difficult sometimes, but at least for me in my last relationship, when my almost mother-in-law was inserting herself in places she didn't need to be.
That was a very nice way to say that. Inserting herself in places she shouldn't be.
Me and my ex just couldn't, you know, we couldn't agree on things. And he said, I'll always choose my family over you. And, you know, that really stuck with me. And I was like, do I want to do this forever? And you have to be a united front. And I don't know. I remember my mom always saying it to my dad, like, we're a team. And she was right. I hope you're listening to that, Mom.
I think that is so, so important. Presenting as a unified front as a couple, whether it's with your kids in terms of parenting, whether it's with, you know, in-laws or parents, it is a really difficult situation when one member of the relationship chooses the opposing side of their partner. That alone isn't bad. It's when they align with a parent against their partner.
Right.
There's a different way that can be handled and a different way that could be said. I mean, they may share the same opinion, but it doesn't have to be ganging up on you.
Right.
You know, somebody could easily say, you know, while I understand your decision and I do agree with you, I need to work this through with my fiance and just kind of, as you said, not have them insert themselves where they don't belong.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the second part is, you know, if you do break up and it's not exactly what your family wants. I mean, I think having them understand the reasons about why this is what's best for you and this is what's going to make you happy in the long run, I think that's a huge part of it. Yeah. I know it's tough for families. My parents struggled, even though I had a really good reason for breaking up with my ex-fiance. It was still tough for my family. He was a part of our lives for 6 years, and you know, he was involved in so much, and it's like, just as much as you're breaking up, in the relationship, you know, they have a piece in it too. And
Yep.
I think that's tough for them to move on because they don't really get to have the conversations with the person that you are breaking up with, and they may have anger or resentment for whatever reason.
Yep.
But I think as long as it was always helpful for me to be open about how I was feeling and where I was. And at the end of the day, if you're happy, they're going to be happy for you. And just as long as you're communicating that the reasons that I'm making these choices is because this is what's going to give me my confidence. This is what's going to make me feel good about myself. This is what I need to do long term. It's not selfish. It's, you know, you need to put your happiness first.
And I think that's super important that, you know, that you said that, and people listening to hear that it is not selfish. And again, and I know I'm kind of using women more so as an example, but I just think in these situations, and from my experience working with people, that this usually applies more to women, that there's a ton of guilt in focusing on your own happiness. That it should always come second. It should come after everybody else's. Once everybody else is taken care of, then you take care of your own happiness. Because if a woman's taking care of her own happiness first, it doesn't look good, right? It looks selfish, or they're too there's like a stigma with being too independent, you know. I remember, because I got married late, I remember, you know, people making comments to me about, you know, well, you're something. It was like, you're not marriage material. You're a career woman, or it was always something like that. And I remember thinking, like, you know, you don't know if you should believe it or not, because you don't know any different. Everyone's married. Everyone has kids. Doesn't mean they're happy. I didn't know that at the time. But I was in grad school, and I knew that I needed to do this for me, and I wanted to do this for me. And I knew, even though it sucked, I knew that there was no way I would be able to be good for myself and then subsequently be good for anybody else if I didn't do this for myself. And if it looks selfish and weird that I got married at 34, then it did, you know, then that's other people's, you know, perceptions. But it's like the oxygen masks on the plane. You have to put yours on first before you put a child's on. And that's exactly why you have to make sure you're stable so that you can then kind of bring other people into your life. And I don't think that's selfish. I think it's smart. So I agree with you on that. Last question. If everyone is taken care of, then you're too depleted. Yes, then you're exhausted and you have no energy to take care of yourself. That's absolutely correct. I could not agree more. Can you talk a little bit about the reasons, and I can kind of chime in with not the mental health part, but I can chime in on the pattern piece of this. But can you talk a little bit about why people stay in the relationship for the wrong reasons as far as the partner themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few reasons. The first that come to mind, people are comfortable. It's what they know. It's what they're used to. The unknown is scary, and it's hard to, especially if you've been in a long-term relationship, whether you're happy or not, it's hard to imagine yourself not with that person because you have all this history with them. Your lives are intertwined. You have this, you know, idea of what your future will look like together. I'm sure you've thought about it, and it's really hard to let all of that go and walk away from it. A huge part, I think, for myself and people in my age group is the fear of being alone. You know, I was very codependent, went from my parents' house to college with roommates, to graduating college, to living with more roommates, to living with my ex. And I had never once in my life been financially independent or living by myself, and that is terrifying.
Were you aware of that as you were going through it, or that's not something you realized till after?
No, that took a lot of like self-reflection and work.
So the only reason I'm asking is so people who are listening or who watch this later understand that that's not, and I agree with you, that that's not something that would be expected for you to see and understand, because then you would take the necessary steps to remedy that. But it would be very odd for people to be able to see that pattern on their own.
Right. The pattern, yes. The fear of being on my own was definitely something that was top of mind.
Yeah.
I didn't want to live by myself. I'd always lived with someone. So that was tough. I think I'm speaking for myself and also what I think a lot of other people experience is you feel the need to exhaust the relationship. You put in a lot of work to things. So it's like, I need to just give this one more shot. I need to make this work. You feel as almost like you're letting yourself down or you're just giving up easy. Those are my top reasons. A few others that I could think of. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I think those are my top ones. I'm going to
Okay.
stick with that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's very true. I think, staying in a relationship for the wrong reasons, I think a lot of those reasons don't become realized until way after the fact, when either you're seeing a psychologist or you're talking about it openly now with friends and family members, and they kind of hold a mirror up, not in an unhealthy way, but just to kind of show you what your patterns have been and say, I was thinking about this. You really have never been by yourself. You may never have thought of it in that way, so
Yeah.
a lot of times when I work with women and we look at their history and their patterns and why they may have gravitated towards the partner that they did and how that partner kind of temporarily calmed their fears, but simultaneously made them think that they're not capable of managing those fears themselves, and taking that identity away from them. So it's important to look at the pattern so that in the next relationship that you're in, whenever that is, because you do not need to get back into, I always tell people that just take some time. Take some time. Don't go right back into dating. For people that feel they need to be with people, I work with them on kind of just sitting with that discomfort and figuring out what you want.
Right.
And, to look at their patterns, I like to call it a blueprint of their behaviors and how those behaviors attract certain responses, and figuring out what you want, and then switching your behaviors, understanding why you do what you do so that you can make changes in the moment so that you don't repeat them again. Because really that's all we know is what we've been taught and what we grew up with. It doesn't have to be unhealthy. It could be very healthy. But if you end up with a partner who kind of uses that against you or kind of manipulates it, then that's when it becomes toxic.
I was definitely in a toxic relationship, and I was forced to believe that I couldn't make it on my own, and I had everything in my life. Like, he would make it seem like everything in my life was perfect, and it was so wonderful, and I had all these wonderful things, opportunities, experiences because of him. And there was a ton of gaslighting and manipulation of how I was feeling, my memories.
Can you just say really quickly, can you describe for me what gaslighting is, just in case they don't know what it means?
Yeah, I'll do my best to describe what gaslighting means, but basically it's someone like talking you out of like your own feelings or emotions, sort of invalidating anything that you feel, just making you feel that like your internal feelings like are not justified. Like, you feel crazy for feeling certain ways. You are questioning your own judgment based off of things that you're telling you, and you really just doubt your own mind and who you are because of what this person is saying to you and just the way that they're questioning you and making you feel.
Yep. And we have this is going to throw us up in a minute 45. So just to kind of tag on to the end of that, gaslighting can really make you feel crazy because you don't know what's real or what's imagined, or if you're overreacting, it's just in your head, and it can become very confusing. So leaving a relationship when somebody is gaslighting you is really difficult. And so that's amazing that you were able to do that. It's extremely difficult. Again, I see a lot of women going through that, and when they leave, it's a massive accomplishment because it is not easy. So, Devin, thank you so much.
Thanks.
This was so helpful. I'm so glad I got to talk to you guys.
Me too.
I'm going to have this saved in my story, and I'm going to put it on Instagram TV so people can watch it, rewatch it, and I will put their Instagram name so you guys can go look at their page. It's amazing. They have a ton of resources. I highly recommend checking it out, even if you're not planning on ending anything. It's just really interesting and helpful. So thank you guys so much. I know you're
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. All right,
We
everyone, have a
appreciate
good night.
it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.